always forget that. So thank you. I'm now recording. Good morning again, everybody. So first and foremost, I do just want to acknowledge that today's webinar is hosted by DBHR through Washington State Healthcare Authority. This is going to be an interactive training. We are going to do a quite large group activity a little later on in the session. So please make sure that you are ready to participate at that time. We're not going to go into breakout groups today. I also encourage you to ask questions and participate throughout the session. Please feel free to ask questions. I'm joined by my colleague Earl Leach, and he will be in the chat box ready to answer any questions. And then the slides, as well as the link to the recording of the webinar, are going to be sent by email after the presentation. I don't know if anybody has gotten the first two sessions, which makes me think that Washington will probably send it out. By Washington, I mean Washington Healthcare Authority. It'll probably be sent out after the sixth session. That's kind of what they've done in the past. So I know some of you have had to leave early the past two sessions. That's okay. You will get the recording of the presentation, so you'll be able to catch that last half hour. I do just want to reiterate again, though, that the training is a 2-hour training. Oh, you are getting them after each session. Okay, thank you, Steph. Okay, good. So everybody should have the first and second session. So if you do have to leave early today, that's totally okay. You will get the recording afterwards, so you'll be able to catch that last 30 minutes. But the training sessions are for 2 hours. Okay, I just want to clarify that for everybody. So basics, our training basics, everybody knows they should be connected to audio. And your audio should stay muted throughout the training unless you want to say something. If you want to chat with me, I'm happy to chit chat on audio. Or I'll just put the call-in information into the chat box for anybody not connected to audio. If you don't want to chat through verbally and you don't want to unmute yourself, you can definitely do so in the chat box. Additionally, you can choose to have your video on or off. If you do have your video on, please just make sure that you do have appropriate background and appearance. And then I might have to mute you, or Earl might have to mute you if there is background noise. So please just be mindful of that. If you do have a question, you can raise your hand, or you can just use the chat function. I'll be monitoring the chat all throughout the session today, as well as Earl will. And this is being recorded. I have already started the recording. If you need closed captions, just click on the more, click on captions, and then just click on show captions if you would like to show your captions. But the captions are enabled, so if you need them, they are there. Okay. We're going to keep it moving and go on through. So as I said, we are in session 3, so we're about halfway through, and we're going to focus on ISP and really specifically focusing on the goal development. So yes, a PDF of the present. We can provide a PDF of the presentation in the chat box if anybody needs it. Earl, if you could put that in, thank you very much. And handouts will be provided in the chat box as well. So we are about halfway through, and this is what the rest of the series is going to be looking like. This is me. This is a little bit about me. I'll give you a quick introduction since I haven't facilitated this session yet, this series. My name is Emily Bands. I've been kind of in the background facilitating with my colleague Earl. We both work in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. I have been working in the department since 2019, so I've been here for about 3 years. You may have seen me and some of the other webinars and trainings I facilitated for Washington. I've been on all of the Golden Thread trainings. I've also done some of the landlord outreach community calls. And Earl and I just facilitated a webinar last week as well. And just brief background, I started my career working in supportive housing out here in New Jersey. I worked as a direct care staff, worked as a manager of a supportive housing program in a county here in New Jersey. And then from there, that's when I transitioned into working in my role here in the department. So I do have direct care staff experience. I have supervision experience, and I'm also an LPC in New Jersey. So I'm a licensed professional counselor in private practice. So that's a little tidbit about me, just to let you all know about who I am. So let's get started. Let's jump into it. Very quickly, let's review the learning application. So who was able to use the wellness worksheet with a client? Did anybody use the wellness worksheet? So if you use the wellness worksheet, tell me yes. If you did not use the wellness worksheet, tell me no. We'll start there. All right, so I'm getting lots of no's in the chat. But that's okay. It's a resource. It's definitely not a required document for your for FCS and for providing services. I saw somebody is planning on potentially using it. The other thing I will say though is the worksheet itself is very versatile, and it's just very much focused on the dimensions of wellness. So even if you don't actually use the physical worksheet with any of the individuals that you're working with, I just want to highlight again how helpful using the 8 dimensions of wellness and kind of incorporating that into your assessment planning and assessment process can be, because it does give you all a really good starting point, which can be helpful because, you know, talking about goals and beginning this goal development process with individuals, it can be really overwhelming and very time consuming and just a large task. So even just thinking about incorporating the 8 dimensions of wellness could be potentially helpful for you when you're beginning this process, especially if you're a new staff and you don't already have a process, okay? In the future though, if you do end up having any questions about how to use the form, or if anything comes up, please feel free to reach out to us. We do have our contact information, I believe, at the end of the PowerPoint. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. So let's jump into today. So first and foremost, we're going to be focusing on looking at some of these factors that determine readiness, as well as the stages of change, and kind of looking at how readiness and the stages of change kind of flow in together and work together. Then we're going to move into talking about knowledge, skills, and resources. And I'm going to give you guys another form that you could potentially utilize to help you through this process of I'm trying to think of the steps and I'm not thinking of the steps. So of this process of developing knowledge, skills, and resources, we'll say brainstorming, that's what it is. Brainstorm, categorizing, and assessing. Those are the 3 steps of developing knowledge, skills, and resources. So we'll talk about that. And then I'm going to break down the steps of a goal by using the actual form. And that's going to be this large group activity we're going to do together. Okay. So before that though, I want to get into the golden thread. And this is the part of the golden thread that we're really going to focus on today. We're really going to be focusing on this identification of personal goals, which leads into and funnels into this development of the individualized service plan. Okay. So we started out with this idea of the assessment. Okay. And the assessment, the main function of the assessment, just to kind of refresh everybody, is that it's supposed to lead to goal identification, right? The assessment is really what's going to help you and the individual that you're working with determine what goals they want to work on. It very much is an exploration process, okay? You're really exploring what their, hopes, dreams, and aspirations might be, what their valued life roles are and how their valued life roles might connect with a potential goal, what some of those unmet needs are, as well as what the person's strengths are, right? And unmet needs and strengths can kind of go together in the sense of somebody's unmet need is something that they need, and the strength is something that they already have that might be able to help them get there. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the knowledge, skills, and resources. Okay. Now from there, okay, you can then look to this extra step of determining readiness and determining the stage of change. Okay. And this is a really important step you don't want to skip. Okay. And I'm gonna pose a question, and I'm hoping this will help you to understand why this is an important step. So my question for all of you is, have you ever gone through the whole process, right? You met, you did the assessment, you developed the plan, they signed off, you're good to go, you're going out there, you're going to provide those interventions on the plan, and you go and meet with the person and you're like, hey, here's your plan, let's work on it, let's work on your goal. Has anybody ever had the experience where the person said to them, like, I don't want to work on that goal anymore? Or I don't know how to do that. Or, we need to do something else before we can, start working on the goal. Has that ever happened to anybody? You can just give me a yes or a no. I'm getting lots of yeses, right? And I'm not saying yes, so we need to do something else for us. Yes. So thank you all for engaging with me in the chat. This happens, right? And I say that because it's happened to me. It happened to me all the time, right? And I don't know if this is necessarily what's going on with you, but I know that for me, there were times where as a practitioner, I was just so excited and so like ready to work on the goal with the person, and the person seemed interested and they seemed motivated, but I didn't necessarily take this step of exploring, of determining their readiness for working on a goal and assessing what that person's stage of change is. And that's why this is really an important step, because exploring interest, okay, and where the person is in, and how interested the person is toward making a change is a critical piece of helping them to develop the goal, okay, for these two reasons. First and foremost, somebody might have a desire to work on a goal, but they might not be ready to take action on working on that goal, okay? So, and that's where readiness can come in, right? Because when we're thinking of readiness, we're determining how ready somebody actually is to start working on this goal. And that's not to say that if the person isn't ready, the goal shouldn't be worked on. Okay, that's not the case, because there's sort of in terms of readiness and stages of change, they're kind of holding hands with each other, right? Because somebody can have interest and maybe not be ready, but that could be indicative of the fact that that person is in a pre-contemplation or a contemplative stage of change. So the interventions that you're going to employ while someone's in a pre-contemplation or contemplative stage of change need to link up with those stages of change, okay? And that's how those things work together, right? So we have this idea of interest and readiness and whether or not this person is ready in order to pursue the goal. If they're ready, then they're in an action stage of change, and you are going to employ interventions that are aligned with that. But if they're somewhat ready, they might be more of in a preparation. And then if they're just not ready, or preparation or pre-contemplation, and then if they are ready, or if they're not ready at all, then they're more in pre-contemplation. Okay, so you want to make sure that you are exploring this sort of middle step of figuring out what their interest and readiness is in something, and then exploring the stage of change and employing interventions aligned with that, okay? And then finally, we're going to talk about knowledge, skills, and resources, but I'm not going to get into that because we're going to talk a lot about that in a little bit, okay? So let's talk about readiness, okay? So these are some factors that can help you to determine whether or not somebody is ready to work on a goal. And not only help you to determine, but also help the person to determine whether or not they're ready to work on a goal. And the first factor is felt need, okay? And felt need is their level of dissatisfaction with current circumstances, okay? So that's when the person is feeling like, oh, I'm not ready I'm not, I don't like not working. I don't like not working. I don't like not having that extra money. I don't like, sitting home. I don't like it. So they're feeling that dissatisfaction. Okay. The next factor is commitment. And commitment is belief that change is possible and that change will be positive. Okay. And I want to really hone in on those two pieces of that change is possible and that it's going to be positive. Okay. Because somebody can believe that change is possible and not necessarily believe that that change is actually going to have a positive impact. Okay. But those two things demonstrate commitment, and that's what you're looking for. So when the person is maybe saying something like, oh, it would be so, I think I can get a job, I think I could, work like 15 hours a week, or I think I could work like 10 hours a week, or, it wouldn't impact my schedule that much, only working 15 or 20 hours a week. I can still, go to program. I can still spend time with friends and family. It's something I can fit into my life, right? That's that indication that change is possible. And then the indication that change will be positive is like, oh, well, yeah, if I start working, I'm going to have that extra income, right? I'm going to have that ability to, go to the corner store and buy a magazine or buy cigarettes or, buy snacks that I want to get. Or that, I think I'll feel better about myself if I start working again. I think that working again will help me to feel like, like I'm contributing to society, or, I'm really excited because I want to be able to help people, and working will help me to do that. And then the next factor is internal knowledge. And internal knowledge focuses on knowledge related to the person and their desired change. Okay. So what does the person know about this change that they want to make? Is this person at a point where they have all the information they need in order to make the change? Do they have all of the maybe knowledge, skills, and resources, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And then finally, it's that external knowledge. So this is knowledge related to the environment where the change is going to occur. Okay. So internal knowledge is really about themselves. How well does the person know themselves and their wants and their needs and their desires about making this change? So if the person wants to work, what do they know about themselves in a working environment? Maybe they know that they're not a morning person. So working a morning shift, it's not going to do it for them. Maybe they know that they get bored easily. So maybe working for a temp agency where they're, making okay money and they're able to do a different job and work someplace different and get to know different people over the course of a week, or, even like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that might be better for them. Maybe they're a night owl. Maybe they enjoy being up all night, and maybe that's something that is better for them in terms of working at night or working a night shift as opposed to working a day shift. And then again, external knowledge is about this environment where the change is going to occur. So again, we're thinking about like working, right? So the environment at the job, right? So maybe they don't like people. Maybe they're really not a people person. So maybe working with customers is not something that they want to do. They don't want to be front facing with other people. Or maybe they do. Maybe they really enjoy socializing and talking with other people. So maybe being at a place where they are, in front of a cash register and talking and making that connection with other people is something that is helpful for them. So before I keep going, does anybody have any questions about any of these factors that determine readiness? Any questions about felt need, commitment, internal knowledge, or external knowledge?
Can we unmute and just ask?
Yeah, sure.
Can you talk a little bit more about the internal knowledge? Because it sounds like it's like what we as the case managers know about the person? And I just wondering if you could flesh that out a little more.
So I think it could be a little bit of both. I think it could be about what you know about the person as well as what the person knows about themselves. And I do really want to put the emphasis on what the person knows about themselves, because I think there were some times, and again, this is my personal experience, but I think there were a lot of times where I had assumptions about people and about what, they might like or want based on like their behavior that I observed. And I kind of took that as fact without necessarily taking into consideration and asking some of those questions, which I'm going to talk about in a second, to help kind of evoke this information and explore some of these things. So for instance, I had an individual who he experienced auditory hallucinations very, very heavily. It was just part of his symptomology. It's just kind of, one of the symptoms he experienced. And I personally didn't think, because he didn't really like going into the community, that he would really want to be around other people. But he went on to work at a grocery store, and he was not just in the back stocking shelves. He was in the store and he was around people, and it helped with his symptoms, and he was perfectly happy and fine doing that. So that's why I really want to focus on, and I hope that I'm answering the question, Henry. So if I'm not, let me know. But I want to emphasize that it is both. It is both, what you know about the person and their desire to make that change, and, what factors are going to come into play when they are making that change, as well as what the person kind of thinks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So, and then I'm gonna ask, because it sounds like, could you clarify external knowledge then
Sure.
one more time?
Sure. So external knowledge is really just focusing on that environment. So internal knowledge is really what's going on within the person's self, their brain, their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, their behaviors, their personality, all of those factors related to the change. And then external knowledge is really focused on where the change is going to occur. So in terms of, if we look at this example of working, what are the factors related to that job or finding a job that are going to come into play? So the example I gave earlier in terms of like the shift, or not the shift, like the environment, right? So being front facing with somebody or working in the back and stocking shelves. Another example might be if we were looking at something more like skill based. So if we were focusing on a skill like cooking, okay, if we looked at internal knowledge, it could be the fact that, maybe the person has tried to cook before, but they ended up starting a small fire. So now they feel really fearful of actually cooking, right? That's more internal knowledge and information related to the person making that change, right? External knowledge might be in terms of the environment. Maybe a safer option for the person is to cook on a stove with like an electric stove versus a gas stove, because maybe that seeing actual fire is triggering for the person. So kind of thinking of some of those environmental factors. Another example is maybe the example of like taking a shower. So, if the person has internally, right, if the person maybe has some physical disabilities where maybe they have like balance issues, they might need like a shower chair, right? And that's kind of that external knowledge, right? So we know that internally that person has these balance issues, and that, it's going to be hard for them to stand for long periods of time. So that external knowledge is now, okay, well, we're going to get them a shower chair, or we're going to find them a unit that has just a stand-up shower and doesn't actually have a tub because that's safer, or we're going to get like the handrails. Does that kind of make sense? Does that clear it up?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right, cool. Good. Good questions. Thank you very much. All right, so now that we have these factors that determine readiness, okay, how can we explore that? Okay, and these are some questions that can help you to do that. So these are some questions that can help you to explore felt need, Oh, no, let me go back. So we're focusing on these, like, again, evocative, open-ended questions, right? So in terms of felt need, and I'm going to go back the slide just for a second to remind us what felt need is. So felt need is that dissatisfaction with current circumstances, right? So tell me what you like or dislike about the current situation. Tell me tell me about what your life will look like if you do or do not make this change. How important is it for you to make this change? Right? This is very much, these are very much questions that you might ask somebody who is at that point where they're like, oh, I don't like what I'm doing. I don't like what my life is looking like in this area. So you're helping them to kind of explore and process that more by asking some of these questions. Okay. And I know they seem like very simple questions, but they can be, thank you, Jasmine. They are really good open-ended questions. And again, they're directly related to this idea of felt need. Okay. So I'm going to go back again and we're going to look at commitment. And again, commitment is the belief that change is possible and that it's going to be positive for that person. Okay. I'm going to keep it moving. So tell me about risks to making the change. Tell me about how this change is going to make your life better. And thinking about the change that you want to make, do you expect to have to make any changes in yourself to achieve the change? And then tell me how people in your life can help you to make the change, right? And all of this is about commitment, right? All of this is about helping the person to see that it's going to be, it's possible and that it's going to be positive, right? So tell me about risks, right? That could be something potentially holding somebody back from wanting to make the change and making it seem possible, right? How is it going to make your life better? That's directly addressing how it's going to positively impact the person. And thinking about the change, do you have to make any changes to yourself, right? Again, is that possible? Is it possible for the person to make a change in this area? A really good example I can give for this one, right? And this could potentially impact whether or not somebody pursues a goal, but there are certain things somebody might not be able to change about themselves. If somebody if somebody is unable to get a license, and they want to work doing, like, as a truck driver, that there's a misalignment there, right? So they're really not going to be able to work on that goal because they can't get their license, or especially if there's no way for them to get their license back, or maybe that's something you have to explore with them. But that's why it can be really helpful to explore some of these things, because it will help you and the person to know whether or not something is possible for that person. And then the same thing with tell me how people in your life can help you to make a change, right? Again, that's about the positivity and the possibility, because if the person, you might be looking at someone who's like a single parent, right? Is there people in their life that can help them provide childcare? Is there people in their life that might be able to provide extra financial support to them while they pursue this educational goal or this career goal? That can support that, right? And that's going to help to make it possible and to help to make it positive. And then going into internal knowledge, right? Tell me about what is most or least important about the change you want to make. Tell me about what interests or disinterests you about making the change. Tell me about what is most important to you about the change you want to make. Okay. And that's going to help you again to determine some of this information about where the person is at in and of themselves. Okay. So what is most and least important about it is going to help you to understand why this is something they really want to work on. What interests you and disinterests you about it, right? A lot of these questions you can kind of see are very like pros and cons kind of questions, and just very much helping you to gather the information and helping the person to really process and think about why this is going to, how this change is going to, or not how this change, let me backtrack that. How to go about making this change, really, right? What is kind of going on within them that is going to either help them make it or break it when they come to this change. And then tell me about what is most important to you about the change. Same thing with external knowledge, right? So tell me about what will need to be, blah, blah, blah. Tell me about what you will need to be successful at making this change, right? Are there any environmental supports? Are there any accommodations the person might need? Exploring some of that to determine whether they can acquire accommodations or any other types of supports, like going back to my examples with working or with showering, right? So at work, you can definitely support the person in receiving accommodations. In a home environment, you can help support the person in order to, get different supports, adaptive supports, like a shower chair or the shower bars. Tell me about the ideal environment for the change you want to make, right? So if the person is thinking about working, right, maybe they don't even know where they want to work at this point. They just know they want to work, right? So what does that look like for them? And then tell me about where you need to go in order to make this change. Okay. So before we get into this example that we're going to go into, does anybody have any other questions about exploring readiness and some of these questions that we talked about? No? Okay. So let's practice a little bit. Okay, so Patricia is a 35-year-old woman living in Kennewick, Washington. She previously worked in a Safeway for 3 years before a brief hospitalization. She decided to return to work as it would help her financially, but she's expressed some ambivalence. So, what is a question to ask Patricia to explore felt need? Give me an example of a question. And remember, felt need is the desire, right? It's thinking about you would think I would know this because I just said it and I've literally done this 6,000 times. Give me a second. So felt need is looking at when the person is experiencing that dissatisfaction in their life and is ready kind of to explore other possibilities. So what's something that you might ask to help Patricia explore felt need? Yeah, I like that, Patrick, right? What are the pros and cons to working? What are hesitations about working? What are some of your feelings about going back to work? Do you feel obligated to return to the same hours, or can you reduce the time you were there? Perfect. Very good. So what about commitment? Oh, I'm getting some more. Hold on, let me go back. What would be the benefits of going back to work? Can you tell me what kind of financial pressures you were feeling? I like that, Katie. Kathy, how will your work benefit you? What are you worried about? Absolutely. And I just want to point out how very much open-ended these questions are. And that's very, very important. Because again, we're trying to have these almost evocative conversations that are going to help you and the person to process this readiness and whether or not they are ready. So making sure that you're asking these open-ended questions is very, very important. What is a question to ask Patricia to explore commitment? And again, commitment is about how positively the change is going to be on toward their life and whether or not it's possible for them, right? So it's possibility and positivity. So what questions might you ask Patricia in order to explore her commitment to go back to work? Oh, I like that, Patrick, right? So kind of what is the person's motivation for going back to work, right? So are you looking to go back to work to just get a job, or are you looking for a career? What kind of support might you need when going back to work? Can you see yourself doing the same type of job? What are the jobs that interest you and why? And then as some other ones come in, as always, great questions. What actions, interventions do you think you need before applying or going back? So what kind of, and maybe this is more related to knowledge, skills, and resources, Briar, which we're going to talk about, do you think you need before applying or going back? Great. And then what is a question to ask Patricia to explore that internal knowledge? And again, that internal knowledge is what's kind of happening within the person that is going to impact them making that change. Why is it important for you to go back to work? The only thing I would say, Sierra, is maybe not why is it important, but maybe thinking about what is important about working for you. And I know you're probably thinking to yourself, what's the difference? But I feel like when you're asking somebody, why is something important to you? I feel like you can sometimes people might give like more of like a vague, not necessarily vague, maybe that's not the word I'm looking for, but an answer that is more like global. Whereas if you ask what, the person might be a little bit more specific with you. So that's the only thing I'll say to that. Is this desire to go back to work intrinsic or extrinsic? Absolutely. Have you thought about what accommodations you might need or other supports? What skills could you bring to a job? What were some of the aspects that you liked about your job? What disinterests you from working? How could we work to mitigate those? I love that question, Madeline. What is it that made you most happy working, and how can we get that feeling back? I love it, Mary. Katie, sometimes our work family can provide great support. Did you feel that support from your coworkers at Safeway before? Are you looking forward to reconnecting with these individuals? Great questions, guys. And then the last one, what is a question to ask Patricia to explore external knowledge? So again, this is related to the environment where Patricia would be working. Oh, I like that, Patrick. What do you know about the benefits and programs that this job might have? That could obviously be that could make it or break it for somebody, honestly. You never know. Some people want vacation time. Any other questions? Did you have any job goals that you were working toward before that you were looking forward to going back to? Does the mission statement of this job meet up with your values? I love that, Amy. What supports would you need to be successful working? Yep. I love it, Madeline. Very good. So now that we've kind of gone into and talked about readiness. Oh, one more question, Connie. Oh, no, two more. Going back. Do you think you need additional training to do this job? Yep. And checking that Patricia is cleared by medical staff to return to work. Yeah. So, is she in a place where she's, physically capable of going back to work? Yeah, I think, so you might ask like, oh, can you tell me about any conversations you've had with your doctors about going back to work? If she needs some type of medical clearance in order to go to work. All right. So we're going to shift gears a little bit to stages of change. And again, I want to emphasize the fact that readiness and stages of change, we're holding hands here. They're not the same thing, but they're very, very similar. Okay. So when thinking of the stages of change, first and foremost, I want to emphasize the fact that they're fluid. Okay. So you could have somebody in pre-contemplation And you can have them then go through all of these stages of change to go to action. Okay. And then next thing you know, they're all the way back in pre-contemplation. Because that's just what happens. And think about a goal that you've had. Okay. And I really encourage you to do so. Sometimes when I say think about a goal that you might have, people are like, oh, why would I do that? But really think about how you have felt about achieving certain goals in your life. Okay. Because there have been times in my life, I will be very honest with you, where I have been in pre-contemplation about making a change. And I've worked through those stages of change, and I've gone from contemplation, I've gotten to preparation, and I've gone into action. And then I don't know, I just lose it. I just lose it. My motivation's gone. I'm no longer in a place where I actually want to start and be working on this thing actively in my life. And that'll bring me all the way back to pre-contemplation. Okay. The other thing I want to mention is that people experience different levels of motivation for different goals. Okay. And this is, if nothing else today, guys, if nothing else today, please listen to that statement. And I will say it again. People experience different levels of motivation for different goals. You can have somebody who is in a action-based stage of change for one goal and be in pre-contemplation for a different goal. Okay. And I really want to highlight that because I think first and foremost, the stages of change are very much related to individuals with a co-occurring mental health condition and somebody who is like using substances, right? Or just somebody who's using substances. That is very much when you think stages of change, I get a lot of people who say like, oh, we're talking about either co-occurring here or we're talking about individuals using substances. That's not the case though, right? The stages of change can apply to any goal that you're working on. And absolutely, that back pedal is as rough. The back pedal is as rough as the professional. I don't know what you mean by that. I read that differently in my head. But yes, the back pedal though, that is really rough as like going forward. Change is hard. All change is hard. Working on goals is hard. Making changes in your life is hard. But you can be in different places. So you can be at a point in your life where, for me, I am currently in an action-based stage of change because I am going to school for my doctorate. I'm in it to win it. I am in school, right? I'm going to class, I'm doing my assignments, I'm doing all those things. But you know what I'm not in an action-based stage of change in? I am not in an action-based stage of change with exercise. It is not where I'm at. I don't know if anybody else out there is not in an action-based stage of change with exercising, but I am not there. Not where I want to be at least, right? So you can be very much motivated to work on one goal and not so motivated to work on another goal, okay? And then you also want to make sure that the interventions that you are employing on the individualized service plan are related to that person's stage of change. And I know you're asking me, well, how do I know this, Emily? How do I know if the interventions I have on the plan are related to the person's stage of change? I'm going to tell you why. This is why. This slide. This is a very, very important slide. Please make sure you save this slide. Because this is each stage of change, what's kind of happening within this stage of change. And these are the different interventions that you would use during the stage of change. Okay. And I emphasize this because, as you can see, okay, if you look at pre-contemplation and contemplation and preparation, these stages of change are very much focused on motivational interventions and education. And then pre-contemplation is very much focused on just that outreach, the practical support, engaging with the person, building that trusting relationship, and just kind of assessing where they're at, right? It's not until someone's in an action-based stage of change that you're really looking at that skill building, that you're looking at that person building social support, that you're looking at using those cognitive behavioral interventions, right? And then when someone's in maintenance, then, you know, it's again, social support, planning, you can kind of use the gambit there, right? So you want to make sure that you are following this, because again, I'm going to go back to that initial example I gave you in terms of you going out to meet with somebody and you've just developed their plan and you're getting ready to work on the goal, or you're getting ready to work on the plan and the person's like, I don't want to do that. But then when you look at the plan and you're seeing that there's a lot of skill building interventions on there, but this person is still in a contemplation or preparation stage of change. So a really great example I can give that is I worked with a lot of people who were coming out of the state psychiatric hospital. They had been hospitalized for a little bit of time and they needed help with a lot of ADLs. A lot of these individuals I worked with had been, this was like their first time living on their own, or it had been many, 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 many years since they had lived independently on their own. So their skills in terms of like cooking and cleaning, they were, very much in like the young stages, we'll say, right? They had sometimes they had knowledge, but they really weren't in a habit of doing a lot of these skills on a routine, or performing them at all in some cases. So we're in a situation now where the person's in an environment where they need to be cleaning their apartment. They need to be taking the trash out. They need to be, cleaning their apartment. That's a really broad term that I'm using, right? They need to be sweeping. They need to be mopping. They need to be dusting. They need to be washing their clothes. They need to be washing their sheets. They need to be washing dishes. They need to be, cleaning the cabinets. And oh, it's exhausting. Cleaning is exhausting, people. I know everybody knows this, but it is, right? So you're going from an environment where somebody was not doing any of these things because they're in the state psychiatric hospital to now having to keep up with their own apartment. And I say this from personal experience. We're talking about skill building and we're talking about them learning the skill, but they were in pre-contemplation or contemplation. They were not in a place where they wanted to engage in, learning the skill and, needing to participate in this skill daily or weekly, right? They were in a place where, they didn't think they needed to change because they didn't recognize that it was really important initially for them to clean their apartment, right? And maybe they got into contemplation because it's like, oh yeah, I guess every time the garbage smells, I should probably take it out. But I don't want to go outside because it's cold, so I'm just going to leave it outside my door, and then the landlord's getting mad. Or maybe like just kind of thinking about what the benefits are even to keeping up with the upkeep of the apartment, right? We even had individuals who, my agency owned houses, and they were responsible for cleaning a house, a 2-story house. I live in a ranch. I don't even want to clean my ranch, let alone a 2-story house, right? This was very, very overwhelming for people. So initially, we're making these goals that are very much more in an action-based stage of change where somebody is in it to win it and really performing these skills. And that's not where that person was at, right? So you need to kind of backtrack a little bit and look at this pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation stage of change, and what information is going to, what different interventions are going to be aligned with that, okay? Now, I realize that I've been kind of on my soapbox for like a couple of minutes here. So I want to ask everybody, have you ever had an experience like that where you were working with somebody and there was kind of a misalignment with the intervention on the IRP and the where the person's stage of change was at? Has that ever happened? Now, for those of you saying yes, did you recognize during the planning process where the person's stage of change was? Is that something that you assessed for? Or was it after the plan was already developed that then you realized like, oh, this person's not in an action-based stage of change? Does anybody want to share? And that's what was happening with me, honestly. I've had it happen both. And then for me, I made it then a habit, or at least trying to make it a habit of, you know, during that assessment process, really exploring what stage of change the person was in and where their readiness was at. And that helped it so that, Madeline, you realized 10 minutes ago? It's hard in the moment, right? You're with the person and they're like, yes, I want to work on this, I want to work on this. But think about it, goals are really overwhelming, so it's hard to kind of gauge what stage of change the person is at unless you're having some of these really in-depth conversations. And I know all of you have plenty of time to do those things. Just kidding, I know you don't have any time to do those things, but it's important to kind of make time. Connie, I think sometimes the client likes the theory of the change, but is not ready for the practical work of the change. Yeah. And that's where you have somebody who maybe is in contemplation or in preparation, right? They know there's a problem, but maybe they're back and forth with it, or maybe they're trying to figure out the pros and cons and the benefits and the barriers. I like that. That's a great question. That's a great like starter, Amy, right? Is this something that's doable? And we're going to talk about the SMART format, I think, in 2 weeks. But that is kind of aligned with the SMART format when documenting goals and objectives. And then, yeah, Julia, so sometimes clients will share goals they hope to achieve, but have low motivation overall, right? And I don't know if this is the case for everybody, but I know that for me, you know, people were very heavily motivated to work on goals, but then like looking at how expansive the goal was, that's what kind of got people a little hung up and was kind of a barrier for them, right? That being overwhelmed and feeling overwhelmed. But that's where this process of like of assessing and brainstorming, categorizing, and assessing knowledge, skills, and resources can really come into play. All right, so we have this assessment, right? And oh, Henry, yeah, I work with someone who is in the action stage on legal stuff, but when it comes to rebuilding housing stability, they get overwhelmed and negative. Yeah. And I'm happy you really, well, I'm not happy your individual is going through that, but I'm happy you brought that up, Henry, because I think when we see a individual that we're working with, very action-based in one goal, it can be really hard to see and recognize that they might not necessarily be in that place for a different goal because they're already in that action-based stage of change. And it gets really frustrating. I don't know if anybody's experienced this, but I experienced this before. I'd kind of get frustrated at times because I'm like, why are, you know, we're working on this goal, but what's going on with this other goal? And it's because that's just not where their stage of change was. And it can be frustrating, but it's important to acknowledge that and kind of recognize that. So thank you for that example, Henry. So we have this comprehensive assessment, right? And Earl talked about that. We've now determined readiness and the stage of change. And that's where we're looking at exploring interest to making a change. And then we have this idea of knowledge, skills, and resources, okay? And knowledge, skills, and resources are identified to achieve a goal. And what I'm going to teach you is this process of collaborating to differentiate between their current knowledge, skills, and resources. So that's what the individual strengths are. And the knowledge, skills, and resources needed to meet this to meet their goal, which is their unmet need. Okay. All right. So I'm actually going to stop sharing for a second because I'm going to switch things up a little bit because I had our little break in another slide, but I think this is a good time to kind of take a break. And last week, everybody seemed to really want to take a break, so I tried to build one in here. So it's about 1:28. I'm going to give everybody like 3 minutes. And we'll come back and we'll kind of get into this process of knowledge, skills, and resources. Okay, so we'll come back at 1:31. Okay. All right, cool. So, all right. So, and thank you for the feedback, Patrick. I appreciate it. So let's keep it going. Okay. I know that that break wasn't long, but the best I could do, guys. So let's talk about goal achievement. So we have these barriers to goal achievement, and we've kind of identified that when thinking about why people are having challenges with achieving their goals, or what's kind of contributing to that, we've kind of identified this lack of goal-related knowledge, goal-related skills deficits, and the lack of needed resources. Okay, so this is what people sometimes don't have, and it could be one of these three things, or it can be all of these three things. Okay, so in order to kind of overcome these barriers and mitigate that, you can help and support the person in attaining that knowledge, learning those skills, and acquiring those resources. And I know you're thinking to yourself, well, Emily, how will we do that? Well, I have a whole process. We got forms, we got a whole thing. I even have a video on how to do it. So exploring these barriers can then help the person achieve and lead to this person achieving these short-term goals. And we do that through knowledge, skills, and resources. Okay. So knowledge is what does the person need to know? Skills is what does the person need to do? And resources are what does the person need to have? Okay. And I challenge everybody, because we do this in New Jersey too. I present on the same thing. And I challenge my New Jersey folks, and I'm going to challenge you all as well. I challenge you to find me a goal that is not going to come down in some way, shape, or form to knowledge, skills, and resources. All goals come down to knowledge, skills, and resources, every single one of them. And having an idea of what these knowledge, skills, and resources are that the person needs in order to achieve this goal can be not only helpful for you as a practitioner who's, supporting the person in achieving this goal, but also helpful to the person. And this process that I'm going to go over with all of you in general can be very, very helpful to the person, because again, these goals can be very overwhelming. And breaking this down into knowledge, skills, and resources, and really breaking this goal down into smaller pieces can be very helpful. And absolutely, Connie, I think that can happen. Sometimes somebody might self-sabotage for fear of what the change, of what will change if they do achieve the goal. And they might not even be aware of this at a conscious level. And yeah, right. And I think that's also something that can be explored in this process. And I'm not just saying that to say it. I do genuinely believe that. Because if that's the case, right, maybe the person needs skills around regulating their emotions. Maybe somebody needs knowledge of, what happens after they achieve their goal, right? Maybe they're experiencing some negative thoughts or some cognitive distortions around, what could potentially happen, right? Some of those what if intrusive thoughts somebody might be experiencing in terms of what their life's going to look like after they achieve this goal. And that might not be rational or realistic, right? So exploring that with the person could be helpful. Yeah, absolutely, right? I'm a failure, therefore I must fail, right? And that's being able to help the person process and acknowledge that it could be life-changing for a person, or encouraging them maybe to seek out outside therapy as a resource, right? Could potentially be helpful and a very appropriate intervention for the person. So thank you, Connie, for bringing that up. So let's just look at this goal of taking medication, okay? So in looking at this goal of taking medication, these are some things that might go into taking medication. So you need a pill box, right? Some people need a pill box. Oh, no, go back. You need the medications, right? If you're going to take them, you need them. You have to go through that process of sorting the medication, right? So if you have a pill box, you have to make sure that you're putting the medication in the right slot that it goes into. So morning meds go in the morning, afternoon in the afternoon, evening in the evening. If meds go in twice a day, making sure they're going in twice a day. You might need to know that pill size and or the pill color. It might be about knowing the names of the medication that the person's taking, right? Actually filling that pill box, setting an alarm to kind of remember, maybe applying for prescription assistance programs, you know, having an alarm, right? So does your phone have an alarm, or do you need like an alarm clock? And then knowing how to store different medications, right? So all of this goes into this hypothetical goal of taking medication. So let's look at, oh, you know what? I don't want to do this yet. So let's practice. So I want to practice together, right? So we just had this slide where we looked at this goal of taking medication. So I want to practice this goal of finding a job. So yes, the alarm was on there twice because the physical alarm, whether that be on your phone, is separate than setting the alarm, because those are two separate tasks, right? So it could be like having the person go out and purchase an alarm clock. That's kind of like one task. And then the actual skill of setting an alarm is separate from that. That's why it was on there twice, Corey. Yeah. So let's look at this goal of finding a job. Okay. I want you all to put in the chat box all of the things that go into finding a job. What goes into finding a job? Tell me. So Jen, when you say interest, do you mean like interest in working? I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I should have just did this from the beginning. But
yeah, Jen said in working and what they want to do. Interest in working and interest in what they want to do.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I just want to bring this. No, I don't want to do that. Okay. I want to share my screen because I want to start typing. But I've tried many a time to use the annotate function on this. And many a time, I have actually lost my ability to type because I lost my mouse. It's a whole thing. I don't want to do that. So let's look at, so we'll say making a resume was one. And I'll say making and updating a resume. Somebody might need new clothing. We need their important documents. So ID, social security card. So we need job openings. Identifying the job we want. We have a lot of resume. And I'll say job openings and job search. job you want, and interest. I'll add that in there. Thank you, Jen. Right, so maybe like different computer skills. If we're looking at specifically like for an online job search, we have, we'll say, filling out applications, because that might be a skill in and of itself. We'll say job experience. We can say that as its own thing. Type of work, skills, education, and we'll say experience all in here. So I feel like this kind of all goes in that process. Interviewing skills. Yep, interviewing skills. Transportation. You always got to think about transportation. Soft and hard skills. I love it. I'm gonna have to I gotta go farther down the list. I got 44 messages here. Drug screening, we'll say. Oh, references. Okay. We might put that in here. I'll take one more. Who you know versus what you know. You guys, Earl, we don't get this response here in New Jersey. Let me tell you. Don't tell the New Jersey providers I said that, please.
I'll keep it as a Washington specialty.
But man, I can't even go through all of these messages. This is fantastic. I spelled transportation wrong. I spelled screening wrong. Oh, I like that one, daycare. Okay, so this is some of the things. Okay, so I'm gonna put this back into presentation mode. Everybody can still see my screen, right? I hope. But so this is just some of the things, right? So you all gave me like 44 messages, probably more than that, of what goes into this idea of finding a job, right? And this is, let's say this is what the person's actual goal is. Oh my Lanta. This is a lot. This is a lot of information. I just identified here on the screen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I just identified 12 components of this, and you all gave me much more of that. Okay. And I want you to think about, though, like if you were the person and you're sitting down and you're meeting with a worker to try to help you with your goal of finding a job, and you guys are just like brainstorming and throwing out all these things, this is like super overwhelming, right? And what do we do with all this information? Okay. So this is a lot, but this is this first part of what knowledge, skills, and resources are. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip ahead, okay, to this process of exploring knowledge, skills, and resources. And we just did the first part, okay? We just brainstormed. So we collaborated to create a list of what is necessary to achieve the goal, okay? And what I like about this is we don't really have like a person in mind, right? So we don't know what the person already has maybe. And you want to make sure that when you do brainstorm with the person, you want to make sure that you include not only what the person doesn't have in terms of knowledge, skills, and resources, but also what the person has in terms of knowledge, skills, and resources. Ben, just to let you know, the PowerPoint should be emailed by Washington Healthcare Authority. And Earl, if you just want to put it in the chat one more time. Thank you. And then you can just click on it, Ben. But thank you for the feedback. So this is the first part of this process. Brainstorming, we're collaborating to create a list of what is necessary to achieve the goal, regardless of whether or not the person has the knowledge, skills, and resources. Okay. And then we're going to categorize. And when we're categorizing, we're identifying if listed items are a knowledge, skill, or resource. Okay. So then we're going to take all that information and we're going to figure out where it kind of falls into those areas. Is it knowledge? Is it skills? Or is it resources? And then we're going to assess. And when we're assessing, we're working together with the person to determine preparedness. So we're figuring out with the person, is this a skill that they already have? Is it a skill that they need to learn a little bit more? Or is it a skill they don't have? Is it knowledge they already have? Is it knowledge that they need a little bit more help with, a little bit more education on? Or is it knowledge they don't have at all? Or is it a resource, right? Is it something that, and does the person have the resource or does the person not have the resource? And S. Shannon, I want to just call you Shannon, but I think that's your last name. But anyway, you're saying Washington is fortunate enough to have WorkSource that teaches education and skills and empowers people to seek employment. And that sounds like a fantabulous resource, right? So that would 100% fall into that category of resource and whether or not the person needs or doesn't need it. Okay. So I know I've thrown a lot of information at all of you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing again for the umpteenth time and reshare my screen. And I'm going to share sound. And what I'm going to do.
Hi, Emily. How are you?
I'm doing good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share a video with you on a role play that I participated in. I'm the star. Just kidding. I'm not the star. I participated in this role play though. This is my former colleague, Zakia Clay. And we developed this role play to kind of show this process of what this process of brainstorming, categorizing, and assessing knowledge, skills, and resources looks like. Okay, so the video is about 7 minutes. And we're going to watch the video and I'm going to show you guys this process. Okay. All right. So did everyone hear my sound before? Yeah. All right, cool. So without further ado.
Zakia, how are you? Good. So I just wanted to follow up because I know last week when we met and started talking about some of the goals that you want to work on, you talked a little bit about two different things. One was cooking and the other one was going back to school. So I was wondering if we could talk a little bit more about that and start to plan out the steps for your IRP.
I think that sounds great. I was really thinking about it and I definitely want to pursue going back to school, but I also really want to learn how to cook.
Yeah. It's a really important skill, especially since you just moved in. What are some things that you're interested in learning how to cook? What types of foods?
Well, I'm vegetarian, so that limits some food items that I can eat. So I just made the change for health reasons, and I'm not really sure what are good foods to eat to maintain a healthy diet, but still not eat meat products.
So it sounds like you're really focusing on your nutrition, and so learning how to cook healthier items would really contribute to your wellness that you're really trying to incorporate into your life.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I've used in the past is something called a knowledge skill resource form, and that really could give me or us a better idea as to things that you're already doing, skills that you already have in terms of cooking, and areas that maybe we can include on the IRP. Would you be open to having a conversation? And the KSR is actually right here. I brought it with me, and we could fill it out together.
Absolutely.
So the first thing, before we even look at the form, is I just wanted to brainstorm just some ideas of what you think are steps or things that anybody would need to either know, skills that you would need to do, or maybe even resources or items that you might need if you're preparing to cook.
So I definitely think I would need recipes because I'm not really good at looking at a set of ingredients and just putting them together off of the top of my head. So I would need some structure with that. I would need the food listed in the recipes, which is good because the recipes are a great guide. That's why I like to use them. I actually love to read, so maybe even a cookbook.
That's a really good idea. And I'm sure some of the cookbooks will have recipes in it as well.
Absolutely.
I know you just moved in. Can I provide some suggestions to you? I know when I first moved in my place, one of the things that was helpful for me, because I like to bake, measuring cups
Yeah. I don't think I
and measuring spoons.
Yeah, I don't think I got that.
What about measurements? I know sometimes that can be confusing for me. So whether they use the abbreviations TSP versus
TBS.
Yeah.
I never know which is which.
exactly. So would that go along with the terminology?
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely have that in. I was also gonna say, and I don't know if this necessarily is a huge piece of this, but food items like vegetables tend to go bad quickly. So I definitely would have to manage my time so that when I'm purchasing the food items, everything stays fresh and nothing goes bad.
That's a really good idea. All right, so we have a list of 11 items. So that's the brainstorming process. So now that we have that, we're going to flip it around to the actual form, and you'll see here that it's broken down into 3 different categories, whether it's a knowledge, skill, or resource. And so with that, what I would say is if we can go through all of the items and try to decide if what we listed either falls into the knowledge, what you need to know category, whether it's a skill, something that you need to be able to do, or if it's a resource, something that you need to have in order to accomplish your goal of learning how to cook. So the first one is recipes. Do you think that's a knowledge, skill, or resource?
I would say it's a resource.
The next one?
So food items I would say is also a resource.
Okay.
The cookbook is a resource. Actually, these two could probably go together.
Yeah, so we can keep it as a resource for now. I do want to go back to food items too. I see that you put it as a resource, and I agree with that. Do you think it also could be something that you need to know as far as what food items you might need for a recipe?
Yeah, because I can't just go to the store and pick anything.
Yeah.
I have to follow the recipe. So I do need to know what food items to purchase.
And you'll see sometimes as we go through this that some of the items might fall into 2 categories, but that's fine. So the last part of what we're going to do for today, because I know you have to run out, is looking at whether you have a good understanding or have the particular resource we have listed. If you have an understanding but you need a little bit more assistance, or if it's something that maybe you're not aware of at all, or a resource that you just need to acquire that you don't have. So if we go through each of the items, so food items, knowing what food items you would need for a recipe, is that something that you have a good understanding of, you have somewhat of an understanding but need education, or you really, could benefit from some support in that area?
I think I could really benefit from some support in that area.
So let's just put an X or a check there.
Okay.
Terminology and abbreviations.
I need a lot of help with that.
Okay. That's great. And so what I do want to point out though is that all of these items over here where we have need more education, need to learn the skill, or need to acquire the resource, we can take a look at that the next time I come over to really see if those are steps that we can outline on the IRP. But look what you're already starting with. So you already know how to budget, you're already paying your rent on time, and I know from visiting with you over the last couple of weeks, you do seem to have enough food and you're able to go grocery shopping. You do use coupons sometimes, which is really good.
Yeah.
And luckily, a family member gave you pots and pans.
Mhm.
So those are really all strengths that can really help and contribute to achieving the goal of cooking. So,
Thank you so much, Zakia.
No
This was
problem.
really helpful.
So as I try to switch my screen back, what are some of your thoughts on the role play? Patrick mentioned not having the desk between the counselor and consumer, as I'm assuming something that was positive, which I agree with. What else did we like about this role play? Or what else did you find positive about the role play? And Briar, you like that the brainstorm was free form and not fill in the blank. Yeah. And that's exactly what you want that brainstorm to be. Very conversational, very just open, like a very open conversation. Earl, if you could put the knowledge, skills, and resources form in the chat box, because I want to actually open up the form and show everybody. So Earl is going to get that in the chat, and I'm going to open this up. So as you saw, that was kind of, I think, alluded to in the video, going from like the back side of the paper to this side of the paper. So you want to make sure that you start that brainstorming side just on a blank sheet of paper. You don't want to categorize anything. You want to really brainstorm that. And the reason why you want to do that is because what you might potentially find is that there are things that are all three. So you might find something that's knowledge, skills, and a resource, or you might actually find something that's just one or two. And it really depends on where the person is at, right? And this goes back to their readiness and to their stage of change. I told you, it's all connected. Just weaving a whole, connected thing here. So if we think about something like, and I can actually use the example that somebody gave earlier about WorkSource. Okay. So something like WorkSource could actually be a knowledge or a resource. And it could be knowledge or resource because WorkSource could be knowledge because you might actually have to spend some time doing some research with the person to learn more about it. Whether they qualify, how they apply for it. I don't know if it's something you guys apply for, so just bear with me on this. But how do they access this resource? What skills, right? What components of this WorkSource might be most appropriate for them, right? That would be knowledge. That would go under knowledge because they need education in that area, right? However, if we look at something where it's maybe just the resource, then we know that that person already knows about WorkSource. They have the information. They don't need you to educate them on it. And you're literally just giving them the phone number and they're able to call and make that referral, or you can just make that referral for them. A lot of skills can also fall into a knowledge, skill, or a resource. And I know you're thinking to yourself, Emily, how can a skill be a knowledge, skill, or resource? I'm going to tell you how. So if we think of something like budgeting, when you think of budgeting, right, it's a behavior that the person needs to be able to do to achieve their goal. Maybe it's a financial goal. It has that ing at the end of it, right? It's budgeting. But if the person is in a pre-contemplation, contemplation, or preparation stage of change, it might be more knowledge for them, right? It might be them learning about budgeting. What are the pros and cons of budgeting? How is it going to help and impact their life? Exploring that ambivalence of why, they don't necessarily want to make a budget right now. What's a barrier to them making this budget, right? So a lot of it is exploration and education and figuring out how to get them to the action part of the skill, which would be the actual skill, which is you actually teaching them how to budget, maybe using a specific form or a specific method, right? So then that would be the skill. That would be you sitting down with the person, meeting with them once a month, meeting with them bi-weekly to figure out how to do their budget, okay? Or it's a resource because maybe the person knows how to budget. So you just need to give them that worksheet, or you need to support them in going to the library in order to independently print it out on their own, right? So that's why you want to just brainstorm by itself, because this process of categorizing, if you do that when you're brainstorming, you're going to get into the weeds and you might miss things. So you want to make sure you're just very focused on that brainstorming part, and then flipping the piece of paper over and then going into that categorizing and figuring out where things are. Okay. And then the final step of that is going to be that assessment piece, which you also saw in the role play, which is going to you figuring out where the person's at for the knowledge, the skill, or the resource. Now, I also want to highlight that when you are meeting with the person to then go and do their individualized service plan, okay, the information on this form that is either in this second column of I have some understanding, or I have this skill, or the last column of I need education, I need to learn this skill, or I need to acquire this resource. These are going to be the objectives on the plan. And we're going to talk more about objectives in a couple of weeks, but this is that step that the person needs to take in order to achieve their goal. The resources that they have, the skills that they can already perform, and the information, the knowledge that they already have a good understanding of, this is all of their strengths. And this can really be a game changer for some people in the sense of you're going through this list, you have this huge list that you're brainstorming. The person's getting nervous, they're feeling overwhelmed. I know I've said that a lot during this last hour and a half, but yeah, like they're feeling overwhelmed. But now that you've categorized things and assessed them, they have some of these things. They have a good understanding of some of this stuff. They have, or they can perform the skill, or they already have this resource. And being able to acknowledge like, hey, you definitely have some ways to go toward this goal because you do need some education and resources and need to learn some skills. But these are all of the things that you have that can really be something so powerful for a person. So you really want to make sure you put those things on that piece of paper. And that's why, because I know you're thinking, oh, well, they have it. Why do we need to acknowledge it? Well, we need to acknowledge it because that's their strength. Okay. The other thing about this form that I just want to highlight is the fact that you can save this. So when you do this form today, you can save it so that in 6 months from now, or 3 months from now, because I know you guys are a little bit different in terms of how often you update your service plan. But if the person's continuing to work on that goal, you have a lot of the information there already because you've already brainstormed and you've already categorized things. And now, depending on what they achieved during that time period, things that were in these two columns and this last column here might move and shift over to these first columns, right? And that'll now leave way for you to take some other things, right? Because you can't put everything. You can't put everything on the form. You can't work on everything in that 3-month period. So now things from the previous brainstorming place are going to be shifted onto this form, and you're going to have new objectives that you're going to work on with the person, new skills, new education, new resources. Okay. We're going to do this in a really large activity, but I want to ask before we do that, does anybody have any questions about that process? Any questions on how to brainstorm, categorize, and assess? Okay. All right, so I want to keep it moving because, like I said, we're going to do this large group activity. And I'm not going to put into presentation mode, just FYI, everybody, because I'm going to be typing on some of these other slides. And it's like, again, we don't want to annotate because I'm not good at that. So we're gonna do this activity. Okay, so here's some demographic information. So Samantha is a 66-year-old female who has been diagnosed with depression and anxiety since her mid-20s. Samantha has lived with her husband. However, he recently passed away, leaving Samantha unable to independently pay for her rent. Samantha has a 28-year-old daughter who is supportive of other needs, but is unable to assist Samantha with housing. Samantha is still dealing with the grief of losing her husband and finds the process of moving daunting. Her symptoms of anxiety and depression have increased recently. Okay. So this is some background information on Samantha. And here is Samantha's wellness dimensions, okay? So I want to read some of this information. So in terms of environmental and housing, okay, Samantha reports that she's currently at 2 since she can no longer afford to pay for her apartment on her own, as her income is not enough to support her $1,700 a month rent. In order to move from a 2 to a 3, Samantha reports that she will need to downsize to find a studio or a smaller 1-bedroom apartment for less than $1,100 per month. Regarding her emotional wellness, Samantha reports that she's currently at a 2 as she's still dealing with the sudden death of her husband, in addition to the stress of having to find a new apartment and move. Samantha reports that in order to move to a 3, she would like to find a new apartment and move as quickly and simply as possible in order to reduce her stress level. Now, as you can see from this area over here, Samantha did not prioritize the goal of financial wellness, but I still want to read through what she said. So Samantha reports that she's currently a 3 in her financial wellness. Although she will claim her husband's Social Security benefits, her husband was continuing to do electrical work as he was a licensed electrician on the side to help supplement their income. Samantha reports that this extra income gave them enough to pay their rent, as well as debts they were still paying off that she will now be responsible for paying on her own. Samantha reports that in order to stay at a 3, she will need to downsize to a smaller 1-bedroom or to a studio apartment in order to make up for her husband's extra income. So this just gives us some background information, right? Like, she's not looking to, her finances aren't necessarily in a bad place. She's not looking to find a job, right? But her finances 100% impact this emotional and mental health wellness goal, as well as her environmental and housing goal, because she doesn't have enough income right now to sustain her current apartment and she needs to find something else. Okay. Thank you, Earl. So let's brainstorm. Okay. So I'm gonna give you all the choice here. Do we want to do the housing goal or the emotional wellness goal? Which one do we want to focus on? You guys tell me. I have 2 for housing. What else are we thinking? All right, we're just going to do housing because I'm getting a lot of houses happening. Connie, that's okay. So we're gonna do housing, and I'm going to make a little text box here. So we have, okay. Need to start someplace. All right, so we had somebody here say apply for housing financial assistance. Apply for housing financial assistance. I'm actually going to make this small because we're gonna need more room here. So what else do we need in order to pursue this housing goal, right? And we know she needs to find a new apartment. That's it. She needs to find a new apartment within $1,100 and under. So what else does she need? So she needs to figure out the rent budget. So rent budget. And we know she has that, but we're still putting it on the list, right? Because we're putting everything on the list. So maybe applying for some rental relief. Rental, we'll say eviction prevention, because we already have the housing financial assistance. So searching for apartment within budget. Yeah, what's her desired location? That's a really good point, Teresa. So determining desired location. Excuse my spelling and grammar errors. Up credit score. Credit score. Does she know that? We don't know. So, or we'll say housing subsidy here, because I feel like these can kind of be grouped together. Okay, oh, that's actually a really good point, Deanna, right? Talking with current landlord to give notice, give notice, / explain situation. Very important, very, very important. I don't think that one has ever come up in all the times I've done this, Deanna. I don't think that one's ever come up. So that's a really good point. If she's okay, so I'm gonna put that, Anton, with the location. Is there any unsafe places? Because that's good information to know. And that should be are there. Good point, Connie. Downsize possessions. Yep. So Connie, if she was married for over 30 years and had a family, she probably needs to downsize possessions, and that is both emotionally wrenching and time consuming. Yep, this strikes so close to home for me. I personally am opting for really good fires. I have a really good insurance. My kids are terrified. So I will share quickly with all of you that in the summer of 2019, my grandfather passed away. And my uncle actually had to move from Pennsylvania to New Jersey in his RV with my aunt, and they parked it in the back of my grandparents' home. And my aunt and uncle and my mother and father, as well as myself and my siblings and my cousins, all pulled together to downsize and yard sale and estate sale and just remove everything that was a collection of literally 50 years worth of belongings from their home. So yes, it is an emotionally wrenching and time consuming thing. It literally took 3 months. It's great. I got to spend lots of time with my family, but it was tough. And you're absolutely right. Samantha probably has a lot of things. Oh, I like that, Beverly, right? So in terms of talking with the landlord, maybe pursue other units with the landlord. I like that. Yes, Brittany, movers, a storage unit maybe. We don't know. She might need one. Does she need a mediation organization to bridge any gaps or problems? That could be 100% a resource, mediation organization. Resources for seniors. So like financial, housing, moving. What else? Maybe temporary housing. If she can't find something permanent, that's a really good idea. I know housing is not the best right now. Yeah, senior assistance is a great idea. Thank you for pointing that out, Prior. It is worth looking into. And even, I don't know if even maybe like town or city programs. I don't know if you guys have this out in Washington State, but I know like when I worked in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and sometimes like the mayor would have certain funding set aside for social services programs. But like neighboring towns didn't necessarily have that type of funding. So I'm gonna put background check on here, Luann. And yes, she did say in the information that she was going to use her husband's social security. So let's see. We'll say housing wait lists. All right, so we're gonna stop here because we're just having so much fun brainstorming. We still gotta categorize and assess here, people. So what I'm gonna actually do is I'm gonna cheat and I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna paste it here. And we're going to figure out what each of these things are. So in terms of applying for housing and financial assistance, what might this be? Do you think this might be a knowledge, skill, or a resource? Or all three? What do you guys think? All right, so all three. And obviously, if we were with the person, we'd be able to kind of, figure that out. But for the purposes of our activity right now, we'll just put all three. What about the rent budget? Is that something that's a knowledge, a skill, or a resource? Knowledge. Okay. Rental relief or we're having some people saying skill. Why would the budget be a skill? You mean like determining the budget? Oh, see, okay. I hear you on that. I was just literally thinking that $1,100 number, but you're right. It could be a skill, making the budget. So I'm going to make it a knowledge and a skill. Okay, you guys are thinking ahead of me. What about rental relief or eviction prevention resources? Hint, hint. But resource, yeah. Okay. Absolutely, Connie. Thank you. Oh wow, that like trademarked that. That was weird. Okay. Searching for an apartment within the budget. Knowledge, skill, or resource? Skill and resource, all three. Let's say all three. Skill, resource. Determining the desired location. Are there any unsafe places? Do you think that's a knowledge, skill, or resource? getting knowledge and skill, getting some knowledges and skills here. And here's the other thing, right? There's no wrong answers with this because it really is dependent on the person, and we don't have Samantha here, so we're just gonna figure it out ourselves. What about the credit score? Knowledge, skill, or resource? All three. And then we'll do one more. So talking with the landlord around, talking with the landlord to give notice, explain the situation, or pursue other resources. Okay, we'll say skill and resource. All right, so we'll take these first couple and whoa. So from here, we would then assess. And I personally think that this process just looks much, much nicer on the actual form. But if it was on the form, this is where we would indicate if there's a good understanding of this, if they have some of this but need more information, or if they just need education. Okay, so this is where you would then take this information. All of the knowledge would go here, the skills would go here, the resources would go down here, and then you would kind of X off or check off where these things would go. Okay, so this is the process of knowledge, of identifying and brainstorming, categorizing, and accessing knowledge, skills, and resources. Does anybody have any questions about this process? And I'm going to go back into presentation mode to finish up. All right, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I want to make sure we end on time though. So how does this funnel into our service plan? Okay, so the goal was developed using the assessment. Okay, the objective, which we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks, right, is now that those unmet needs identified on the knowledge, skills, and resources. Okay, so everything that's in those, I need more education, or I need education, I need help with the skill, or I just need to learn the skill in its entirety, or I need this resource. All of that is going to be the objective. Yes, Mark. So Earl put the knowledge, skill, and resource form in the chat box. Earl, if you could do so again. But yes, you can download this blank form. You could use it. So the strengths are the knowledge, skills, and resources that the consumer already has. Thank you, Earl. And then you have the ISP, basically. Okay, those are those big components of the ISP. And I'm not going to get into interventions because Earl's going to talk a lot about that next week. But those are basically those main components of the ISP. And that's how the KSR funnels into the ISP. We are identifying these goals, we're identifying these objectives, and we're identifying the strengths. Does anybody have any questions before I start wrapping up? All right, if you have them, type them in the chat. I'm going to go through our little housekeeping stuff. So next week, we're going to have session 4. So that's going to be next Monday, November 28th at 9:30 your time. And we're going to be applying the SMART framework. Oh, so I am doing that next week. Why did I think I wasn't doing that next week? Anyway, that's what we're doing next week. We're applying the SMART framework. And that'll be next Monday, the 28th. For your learning application that we're going to ask all of you to do is we're going to ask that you review a service plan, focusing on the goal and objectives. And we want you to identify whether the objective, don't leave yet, people. Nobody better be thanking me and leaving. Earl, can you put the eval in the chat box, please? I need you all to do the evaluation. You can't leave me. So saying thank you and hopping off, my goodness. Anyway, Earl put the evaluation in the chat box. If you would all please do us a favor and fill out the evaluation. We really do value your feedback. And I think we're going to be doing this again sometime next year. So any feedback you give us is very much greatly appreciated. So for the next session, we're going to ask that you identify whether the objective on the plan is related to a knowledge, a skill, or a resource needed to achieve the goal. Okay, so this is easy. You just have to look at a plan, look at the objective, and is this actually related to a knowledge, skill, or resource? Okay. And then Earl put the evaluation in the chat box, and then that's it. That's questions. So I'm going to stop recording. I'm sorry I yelled at everybody. I just don't want anybody to leave yet. But thank you all so much for being here, for your participation, for your engagement. It is very much appreciated. I'm going to stop the recording now.